Good to
So,
go.
hi, my name's Jacob. I'm really excited to be here and share some of the work that we've done over the past year in the Pedestrian Working Group and a little bit about our goals, plans for the future. So, just a quick summary of what the Pedestrian Working Group is all about. So, we hold monthly meetings with all sorts of different stakeholders who are interested in pedestrian mapping in the US. So, there's a lot of people like me who are just volunteer mappers excited about mapping sidewalks. There's some researchers in the group that study accessible technology, data analysis, and that sort of thing. And they're really interested in all the different potentials that the data has that we want to make. And then there's all sorts of other people from public, private organizations. We have folks from mapping companies, um, folks from local municipalities around the US, all sorts of different stakeholders, which is awesome. A lot of what Maggie just said about these working groups bringing such a diverse group of people together is really exciting to me. It's been a major win, I think, with the pedestrian working group. So we are co-chaired by our fearless leaders, Alyssa and Chad. I think you've heard from Alyssa so far today. You'll hear from Chad soon. And I also just want to shout out, I think we are officially 1 year old, depending on how you count. The announcement for the Pedestrian Working Group was a year ago yesterday. All right, so I hope I have the permission of my, fellow pedestrian working group folks of, throwing out some ideas here. From what I've heard us bouncing around ideas in our group and sort of, you know, bringing some of our different goals together into some sort of cohesive product, what we want to share with the rest of the OpenStreetMap community. Um, we've sort of centered our discussions around this schema. And I'll be talking a lot more about this later in the presentation. But generally, that's sort of this more technical set of recommendations, so this framework for how we'd like to map sidewalks moving forward in a lot of the US. But then we're also sort of starting to make moves towards these other outputs. So maybe these like some sort of mapping guide. We're hoping to be a resource for new mappers, people who aren't as familiar with how to map sidewalks and other pedestrian data. And then we also are hoping to sort of accompany a lot of our schema work with mapping and QA tools that can help people sort of work together and sort of lockstep in how they're implementing these guidelines. All right, so we had a really fun exercise that we did a little while ago, and I wasn't able to fit nearly all of it on this slide, but we were able to list a lot of different user stories, just different ideas of who might be using the pedestrian data in OpenStreetMap and what they might be looking for when it comes to pedestrian data. So that includes people with limited mobility. We're hoping to make this data like available to people who need really detailed navigation directions, for example, like getting across a crosswalk, maybe. We are hoping that this data could be useful to residents who are hoping to advocate for their neighborhood and the modification of their streets, public servants who are studying their areas, all sorts of different user stories. I think there was like 15 some, and we kind of like had to cut it off, sort of figure out ways to sort of merge. There's all these different ideas of who might be using this data, which is both really exciting, but also a bit difficult to know what recommendations we can make that will fit the wide range of users. All right, so I'm going to spend the rest of this talk talking a little bit about the schema that we have been developing so far. This is very work in progress, and you're also kind of hearing my perspective, trying to sort of convey what the group has been working on, what we're thinking about. So we've somewhat settled on these 4 tiers of the schema, and I'm going to sort of talk about why we're doing that and what these tiers represent. All right, so why tiers? What are we talking about when we say a tiered schema, and like what are we going for here? So we're hoping to create these concrete goals for mapping efforts. When people create in a tasking manager, like a new project for mapping the sidewalks in their area, for example, we're hoping that we can create these sort of stepping stones of, all right, we want to map to this tier, and that means that we're going to be using these tags, sort of create this sense of cohesion among how different mappers are approaching pedestrian map data, and also sort of creating a sense of unity in our goals and what we might be agreeing is the most valuable data to be creating, because this data takes a lot of work, a lot of time to create. What we're not really trying to do is create like different new OpenStreetMap tags that might not be accepted by the community. We're hoping to stay very much in the realm of what has been accepted and used a lot already. We're just hoping to sort of understand it better in the context of who might be using that data, sort of standardize around it. And we're also not trying to enforce how other people are mapping sidewalks. These aren't meant to be rules that you cannot break. This is more just about our recommendations. Okay, so I'm going to try to quickly go through some of these tiers and explain sort of our thinking behind them. So the first one is the bronze tier. And what this really is we're hoping to promote separately mapped sidewalks using their own ways, parallel to the carriageway, I think is what the wiki says. And so this means tracing those ways along sidewalk center lines, adding crosswalks where appropriate, and then this also involves mapping the roads with whether or not there is a sidewalk adjacent to them. So that's using the sidewalk equals no or separate type of tag. And so this we're hoping can be achieved with most aerial imagery products. You could mostly armchair map this data, and it provides a really nice stepping stone into some of the more detailed accessibility-minded tags that we're hoping to promote. Okay, so the next step up, once again, this is sort of a general look of what we're thinking. These aren't like all set in stone, but the silver tier is meant to be some high impact tag additions to that skeleton of separately tagged sidewalks. For example, using surface tags, starting to add curb information on the nodes between a crosswalk and a sidewalk. And there's also this sort of interesting discussion over if you add a small way between a crosswalk and the sidewalk center line, which is a common issue at intersections. I haven't really checked with Chad whether he's cool with this, but I kind of want to call them hanging Chads. So let me know if that's going to stick. All right. And then with the gold tier, we're kind of thinking that this is a really great achievable yet high standard of tagging for sidewalks. So we're trying to pick a number of tags that might be difficult to survey. You might have to go in person to understand whether or not a tag is appropriate in a given location. But hopefully we can pick a number of tags that will benefit a lot of the users who are hoping for better navigation data, or those municipalities that are hoping to better understand the quality of their sidewalks. So this one's a really interesting tier. We're hoping to make this achievable yet difficult and also high value. And where does the balance lie between those different factors? And then lastly, we have this diamond tier, which is basically a catch-all for things that we think are really valuable and could bring a lot of value, but might be really difficult to achieve all in one go. So this isn't necessarily meant to be achieved necessarily, but more a set of really high value tag recommendations that we're hoping to promote and better understand how they impact different users. All right, I think that's the end of my time, so I'll wrap up here. Please reach out to our co-chairs, Alyssa and Chad, if you're interested in joining. I added a QR code here for our interest form. And yeah, happy to answer any questions anyone has about the Pedestrian Working Group. Thanks so much.